I like it. Okay, but for real, let's talk about Battlefield 6. So at the time of recording gameplay for this video, I have about 80 hours dumped into this game, and it's only been out for a couple of weeks. For further context, I also work hospital shifts and got married during this time, so it's safe to say I'm really enjoying Battlefield 6, or at the very least, I'm incredibly addicted to it. But that could have been completely different, as I never played the beta and had no interest in buying the game. However, it was around this time that I was upgrading my PC and actually got a free code for the game when it launched, so I thought, hey, I already have a code for the game, why not try it out? And boy was I not disappointed. For the record, my gaming history with Battlefield is fairly limited. The only titles I've played in this series prior were Battlefield 3 and 1 for the PS3 and PS4 respectively. I've put a lot more hours into games such as Call of Duty and Rainbow Six Siege, for example. So I'm essentially coming into this game as an outsider with a fresh set of eyes. Despite my pedigree in other shooters, however, I will do my best to refrain from comparing Battlefield 6 to other titles as much as I can. This game should stand on its own merits for what it is. If you've been hiding under a proverbial rock for the last decade and a half, the Battlefield series falls into the niche of war-style first-person shooter gameplay with a heavy emphasis on large-scale combat, vehicles, and Michael Bay explosions. The series has explored a variety of time periods and locations, but I've mostly preferred games that take place in the modern day to the near future, and Battlefield 6 falls squarely into that same category. If it hasn't been obvious yet, this review will heavily include my own opinions, but it will also be reflected through an objective lens. Despite spoiling that I've been enjoying my time so far, there are definitely some areas that I dislike, and other areas that could use some improving. The game is still pretty much brand new, so a lot of things on this list could be subject to change, so when I get to my nitpicks, take them with a large grain of salt. Also, I will only be judging the multiplayer side of things. I have no interest whatsoever in the campaign, and at the time of this recording, the Battle Royale has not dropped yet. Okay, enough of the disclaimers, let's get into the good stuff. First off, the moment I loaded into a match, the graphics were amazing. I like to get a baseline before I start tweaking the graphics settings, and my god, the game is just so pretty to look at. Even after lowering some settings to get better FPS, the game still looks gorgeous, and since this isn't the most ultra-competitive game like Siege X or Counter-Strike, I'm willing to take a small hit on performance for it to look this good. In relation to performance, I find this game to be very well optimized, which is a lot to say for video games in 2025. Even with high fidelity and tons of explosions and particle effects littering the screen, I hardly feel any hitching or stuttering. Of course, I'm playing on a newer rig, so my experience may vastly differ from others, but I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that Battlefield 6 is only available to the newer generation of consoles. It's not held back by forcing compatibility for the PS4 and Xbox One. Of course, this means that people who don't own a PS5, Series S or X, or a decent PC can't currently play the game. But we're talking about hardware that came out over 12 years ago. I think the sacrifice was worth it. I'm also going to gush about the sound design for a moment. It's god tier, hands down. The sound engineers over at DICE and Battlefield Studios have had this thing nailed down since Battlefield 3. They really nailed down what it's like to be part of warfare in the most elegant and haunting way possible. Each shot feels punchy and powerful. When you get shot, it feels like the bullets are flying right past your head and you're encouraged to take cover. The footsteps each player makes feels crunchy and satisfying, explosions feel deafening and rock you to your core, after which the crumbling rubble from the wreckage of buildings echoes the streets. Hearing jets whiz over top of the objective while they dogfight is a canon event for any Battlefield player. Like, just listen to this. The sounds change depending on the environment where they originate from and which area you're currently in. The crack of a sniper rifle can feel echoey and haunting when fired in a valley, or deafening and abrupt if fired indoors. I heavily suggest turning on the War Tapes VAL, aka Very Aggressive Listening audio preset, if you want that true PTSD experience. Everything said so far makes you feel like you're part of a cinematic encounter. Even dying feels like you're in a movie. What other game can make you feel like this?
Here, thank you.
Okay, forget that I died literally a second later, this moment was still fire. Let's talk about gameplay for a moment. In terms of movement, it certainly feels faster than what I remember from previous Battlefield experiences, but I honestly don't mind. You're not running at the speed of light, and you don't feel like you have cement blocks surrounding your feet at all times. I think the devs achieved a very good balance here. There really isn't much movement tech to speak of. I was told you could bunny hop if you care about that, but I've never really tried and I don't feel worse off for it. The worst offender I can currently think of is that you can jump to a slide, but there really isn't any benefit to doing so. Gunplay feels punchy and responsive, and aside from some issues that I'll describe in a few minutes, it feels good to fire a weapon, which should be obvious considering this is a first-person shooter, but it feels nice to have an FPS where simply firing a gun feels enjoyable. I'll be honest, some of the guns do feel a little underwhelming without any attachments, but after leveling them up a few times, you can unlock some solid options that makes almost every gun feel somewhat viable for the situations they're designed for. The attachment system feels very intuitive and customizable for what kind of feel you want for your weapon. You're given a pool of points to spend across all parts of the gun, with the better attachments costing more points. So, for example, if you want a suppressor on your muzzle, you may not be able to afford a higher magazine size or a different type of ammunition unless you make sacrifices elsewhere. I think the weighted attachment system is great for letting the player play around with different combinations without it becoming a one-size-fits-all situation, and the devs can always raise or lower point values later if they need to. By default, the game features an open weapon system, meaning any class can use any gun from any category, unless you're specifically in a closed weapon lobby. These categories being assault rifles, carbines, SMGs, LMGs, DMRs, sniper rifles, shotguns, and of course your secondary, which just is a pistol. As I understand it, this is a departure from previous Battlefield games, and has caused quite a lot of discourse in the community. But honestly, I like the change. I think players are encouraged to try out different roles without being constrained to a type of weapon that doesn't fit their style. Like, if I was playing Engineer on a map that had wide open spaces like Operation Firestorm, it would feel kind of bad to be constrained to an SMG. Don't worry, I'll talk about weapon balancing in the next part of the video. That being said, each class has specific proficiencies for using their designated weapons, so you're encouraged to play with the recommended loadouts. Speaking of which, let's talk about each of the classes. In my experience, each infantry class feels good in their own ways and provides unique benefits to the team. In most situations, it's advantageous to have a healthy mix on the whole team. However, depending on the map or the game mode, you might want to forego having certain types on your team. Engineers, for example, feel pretty weak when there's no allied vehicles to repair or enemy vehicles to destroy. Assaults are the workhorses of the team. They're made for playing the objective. They're generally the fastest class, gaining buffs when moving and firing, and capturing objectives quicker. They have increased explosive capability, can whip out a deploy beacon for squad members to spawn on, and they have a cool little ladder to reach flanks, and can bring a second primary as one of their gadgets. Their signature gadget is the Adrenaline Injector, which is supposed to provide resistance to explosives and stuns, but honestly it feels pretty weak. And their class weapon is the Assault Rifle, which lets them draw and aim sooner. Engineers come in one of two forms. You're either risking your life to protect your team's vehicles, or you're doing everything in your power to ensure the enemy's tanks and other vehicles don't last an extra minute on God's green earth. Their signature gadget is the Repair Tool, which lets them repair allied vehicles and equipment or damage enemy assets. They have an array of rockets and mines to dish out damage, as well as a cute little robot that can defuse and arm explosives, repair equipment, and place mines. Engineers get better hipfire accuracy with SMGs, and explosive resistances while they keep repairing vehicles. It's gonna feel like you're putting in an extra shift after working your real 9 to 5, but in a fun way.
Day is never finished. Master got me working. Someday Master set me free.
Dude, shut up, Cartman!
Playing as a support will have you feeling like Desmond Doss as you run around the battlefield trying to revive everyone within a 5-mile radius. Their class ability is the Supply Bag, which provides health regen to allies as well as a steady regeneration of ammo and equipment. But their signature tool is the Shock Paddles, which lets you revive any ally instantly. Some other handy gadgets include trophy systems for grenade and missile denial, deployable cover, smoke launcher, mortar launcher, and incendiary launcher. Supports gain faster maneuverability when using LMGs and have a variety of passives to encourage healing others. They're essentially medics that provide the team with other benefits. Last is Recon, and while they're known for their sniping capabilities, they're better used for spotting enemies and marking targets for their team. Their signature gadget is the motion sensor, which lets the whole team know when an enemy is nearby. Recons have the ability to spot any enemy by simply aiming at them, marking them for the whole team, and once unlocked in a match, they have the amazing ability to prevent an enemy from being revived if they get a headshot. This class has less gadgets to work with than others, but they're all fairly useful. Of course, you have your standard Claymore mines for stopping flanking enemies and C4 for taking out vehicles, but the best gadgets are the Laser Designator, Tracer Dart, and Recon Drone that either let you spot enemies from above or designate enemy vehicles so they can be taken out quicker by lock-on missiles. The Recon Drone is especially handy for taking out enemy gadgets and racking up a lot of assists for simply looking at enemies. You also have your Sniper Decoy, but it's more of a gimmick than anything. Recons have an increased proficiency with sniper rifles, as you can expect, leading to reduced weapon sway, faster rechambering, and letting you steady your aim for longer periods. Out of all the classes, I'd say that Assault provides the least tangible benefit to the team, but that's not to say it's useless. They're really good at getting into the objective and fleshing out entrenched enemies. As I said before, each class brings a unique benefit to the game, and even without a closed weapon system, it feels well designed and worthwhile to experiment with different playstyles. One last thing that needs to be mentioned before we close out this section of the video, and something that EA needs to be given credit for despite usually being a sketchy company, is that cheaters and hackers are being banned day one. This is essential for the survivability and enjoyment of the game. Cheaters are in shambles, and it's great that this is a priority for the developers and the publisher. Of course, this is likely only a financial consideration for the company rather than a quality of life for the players, but hey, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Alright, I think I've mentioned most of the things I like about Battlefield 6. Let's talk about some of the negatives for a minute. Let's talk about glitches, and yeah, there's a few. There's some real funny ones, like how seemingly out of nowhere a massive orbital strike will come down from the heavens like the Hammer of Dawn. There's also the glitch where running into geometry at certain angles will bounce you up in the air like a trampoline. There's also frustrating glitches, like for some reason sounds will just not play for me or be delayed, and this happens whether or not I'm recording footage on OBS. Sometimes the HUD will have an overlay like you're in a tank or the respawn screen for no reason. While ADSing, I've noticed your whole screen can sometimes be blurred out, and it's not just the peripheral unless you die or swap weapons. Support bags sometimes don't supply ammunition. One detriment for challenges that we'll get into in just a few minutes is that certain actions sometimes won't give any score, like repairing vehicles. There's also documented hit registration issues where a bullet hitting an enemy on your screen sometimes won't register on the server. I'm sure there's more glitches than what I've just listed, and it's not like they ruin my enjoyment of the game, but they do hamper it a little bit when repeatedly exposed to them. I don't know if you can count it as a glitch, but the game will cause my PC to randomly crash and reboot without warning. Like, it hasn't happened with any other game, but I'll admit it could just be a me issue. There's also some things I wish could be changed about the game, but a lot of it comes down to personal preference. For starters, a lot of the weapon classes feel weak right now and need a balance. LMGs and most ARs feel kind of underwhelming in comparison to SMGs, and a lot of it comes down to bloom, also known as spread or dispersion. I won't get into the nitty-gritty of it. If you want better details, I suggest you go watch Exclusive Ace, but it boils down to SMGs having a lot less recoil and variance than other classes of weapons. Meaning, even at longer ranges, your shots will naturally be more accurate than other classes. This is a known issue, by the way, so I'm not just coping for my terrible accuracy. Though, maybe I am. So far this whole video, I haven't talked about vehicles at all, and that's because I haven't had much experience with them, so I can't give my concrete opinion one way or the other. Helicopters and jets especially, it feels like there are people literally spam clicking the jet spawns the whole game, so it makes it hard to get better at it. That's not a gripe with the game per se, it's just something I wanted to include. I will say that the vehicles feel unnaturally weighty, almost like a pendulum swinging, so you need to keep in mind the momentum when driving or piloting. Another nitpick I have is the lack of concrete numbers when building your loadout. It's great that we have damage, rate of fire, and magazine size, but what the heck does precision and control mean? Or when an attachment says greatly reduces recoil. The only saving grace for this is that you can test out your guns in the firing range instantly in the loadout screen, which I'll admit is a nice quality of life feature. In my opinion, the maps are pretty limited on launch, and most of them are fairly small. It can make the gameplay feel really claustrophobic, and things can get a little too chaotic for my liking. The spawns can also feel random at times. Sometimes when I try to spawn on an objective when it's ours and there's no enemies on the point, I'll be placed 50 meters behind it. Sometimes I'm allowed to spawn on a teammate who is clearly in a gunfight, and I get shot immediately by an enemy with no chance to fight back. I understand that spawn logic can be difficult to control with 32 players on each side, but nothing is more frustrating than spawning in to instantly die in certain situations. The devs have already acknowledged they're making fixes to my next point, but I want to include it anyways. The lighting when looking outside from within a building and vice versa makes it incredibly hard to see. When you're looking outside, it can feel as if you're being blinded by the sun, and when you're looking inside, the shadows make it incredibly difficult to see. This supposedly simulates how our eyes adjust to different lighting conditions, but the thing is, our eyes literally already do this in real life, and the game takes it to the extreme. If I'm looking at a bright screen and my screen gets dark from looking inside, my eyes will already do the adjusting. I don't need the game to do it for me. In attempting to make a realistic gameplay experience, I think they've gone too overboard and made something that is actually unrealistic. Alright, this is my last point and I promise I'll stop complaining. Going back to weapons for a minute, multiple attachments and weapons take an egregious time to unlock. Thankfully, they toned this down a little bit after a few days of release, but XP gains sometimes feel like they're running at a snail's pace. I understand everything should not be unlocked within just a few hours of gameplay, but it shouldn't require literal days of in-game time to achieve this. On top of this, some weapons and equipment can only be unlocked through multiple layers of challenges called assignments, and oh man, some of these are bad. For example, to unlock the last sniper rifle, you have to perform 100 headshots with the DMR and inflict damage over 75 meters, which isn't too bad, but then you have to get 150 headshots with a sniper rifle from over 200 meters away.
What?
This is literally impossible on most of the maps, and it's caused some players to load up bot matches just so they can farm this out. Another horrendous challenge is the final one for the engineer class, which requires you to repair friendly vehicles for 6,000 points in a single match. This is almost impossible to do even when specifically going for it. The footage you're seeing right now is me cheesing it by swapping back and forth between mounted turrets to deal damage and repair the vehicles. And even then, I had to hope either my team or the enemy team didn't stomp the match in a landslide. It feels like they chose a random number to put in for a challenge completion and called it a day. Now, I know I was just being negative and harping on the game for a little bit, but that hasn't ruined my experience so far. I really like Battlefield 6 and I really want it to succeed. So let's talk about the future of the game for a moment. By the time this video comes out, or maybe a couple days after it's published, Season 1 of Battlefield 6's post-launch is set to release. Being a live service game, of course there's going to be a battle pass, weapons, and operator bundles to purchase. There's also going to be new maps and new weapons to unlock, and honestly they look pretty sick. There's also the Battle Royale mode coming out, but I have literally zero interest in it. Maybe I'll try a few matches to see what it's like, but I've never been a huge fan of One Life game modes. I just hope weapon unlocks aren't locked behind the Battle Royale, and I also hope the inclusion of this game mode doesn't pull resources from the multiplayer and make it a worse experience. The cosmetics are where things get a bit more complicated. I don't know if the images have been leaked or if they're from an official source, but some of the skin concepts have gotten some fans into a bit of a tizzy. Do I think these skins look a bit silly? Yeah, and if you're looking for a tactical advantage, then there's none to be found here. You're going to stick out like a sore thumb. Do I think this is the worst thing that can happen to the game? No, not by a long shot, but it has a lot of people pissed off for quickly abandoning the realism they wanted. I may catch some flack for this, but to play devil's advocate, I'm going to make 2 points. 1, Battlefield is not a milsim and has not been for a long time. You can jump out of a jet, launch a rocket at an enemy jet, and land safely back in your own, and that's celebrated by the community. Wanting realism for realism's sake is not a good justification for disliking these sorts of inclusions. 2, let's be real here, the current era of gaming is live service. If Battlefield 6 is going to last for at least a few years with consistent free updates and content, they need to sell items to justify it. I'm sure EA has several analysts on their payroll that have made predictions of what items would sell to the average gamer. I really don't think that generic military skin number 6 will sell to most people. Of course, I don't want EA and DICE to go overboard with their weapons and cosmetics. I know I said it at the start of the video, I try not to compare other games to Battlefield, but I really don't want a Call of Duty or Fortnite situation with insane skins cluttering the map. But if this is the extent of what we're to expect over the course of the game's lifespan, I'm fine with it. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Just don't look at the Battlefield subreddit, it's a mess in there. Overall, I've been having an amazing time with the game, more than I thought I would when I first tried it out. Battlefield 6 is a nice change of pace from the close quarters fast twitch reaction shooters that I've become accustomed to. There's plenty of fun to be had here, and it's even better if you have a friend or two to share it with as well. I only stick with 1 or 2 games at a time, and this will likely be one of them, at least for the next year or so. We'll have to see what kind of content the devs are cooking up to keep the game engaging. So what's my verdict? In its current state, I give Battlefield 6 8.5 out of 10 loonies. Certainly some room for improvement, but definitely worth picking up if you're a fan of the genre. Thank you so much for watching the video. This was my first dip into review-style videos, so I hope I made it enjoyable for you. What do you guys think? Are you having a fun time with Battlefield 6 so far, or do you think it's a disappointment from the rest of the series? Drop a comment to let me know what you think. Anyways, gamers, I've been Cormac, y'all have been amazing, and I'll see you on the battlefield.